Walter didn't tell me right away. That's the part I keep thinking about. He was out there 3, maybe 4 days before he said anything. And even then he didn't call me. He called his daughter, she called me, and by the time I heard the story it had already been smoothed over a little, made to sound less bad than it was. His daughter Carol, she's got this way of talking where everything lands softer than it actually is. She said, "Dad had a little incident outside the pharmacy." That's the word she used, incident. Like he'd spilled something, like it was a minor inconvenience and everybody had moved on. I said, "What kind of incident?" She paused. And in that pause I already knew it was worse than she was going to say. He fell on the curb. He had a little trouble getting back up. A little trouble? 41 years I've known this man. I know what a little trouble sounds like when it isn't. I told her I'd go over there Thursday. She said, "You don't have to do that, Gene." I said, "I know. He's sitting in his recliner when I get there. The brown one. He's had that chair since maybe 2003, 2004, somewhere in there. The armrests are worn flat, not torn, just flat. From years of pushing himself up out of it, you can see exactly where his hands go every single time. Television's on. Volume too high, which is what Walter does when he doesn't want to talk about something. I've known that about him for a long time. You walk in, the volume's high, you're not getting anything real out of him for at least 20 minutes, maybe more. So I sat down across from him, didn't say anything, just sat. He lasted about 4 minutes. Maybe 4.5. Then he picked up the remote and turned the sound down without looking at me. He said, "It was raining." I said, "I know." He said, "The curb came out of nowhere, one of those new curbs, flush to the ground. You can't tell where the street ends and the sidewalk starts. They do that now. Don't ask me why." I said, "Yeah." He looked at the television for a while. Some nature program. Birds, I think. Something with birds. Then he said, and I want to get this right, because he said it a specific way. The kind of specific way a person says something they've been working up to for 3 or 4 days. He said, "My body couldn't fix it, Gene." Not I couldn't fix it. My body couldn't fix it. I've been thinking about that ever since. The way he split it up like that. Like the body was something separate from him. Something he'd been trusting for 81 years and it had finally let him down. And he wasn't angry exactly. He was just recalibrating. Like a man who finds out a tool he's used his whole life isn't as reliable as he thought. He wasn't crying. Walter doesn't do that. He was just sitting there in that chair with his hands on those worn flat armrests, telling me the truth as plainly as he knew how. He told me what happened in pieces. Not all at once. A little here, then the television for a while, then a little more. The curb was maybe 4 inches, maybe less. He'd stepped off it 100 times probably. That exact same curb outside that exact same pharmacy. He goes there every 2 weeks for his prescriptions. Has for years. But this time his foot came down wrong. He thinks his shoe caught the edge, though he's not entirely sure. And then he was down, just like that. No warning. No slow fall you can catch yourself in the middle of. Just standing. And then on the ground. He said the pavement was cold. That's one of the things he remembered most clearly, how cold the pavement was right through his jacket. He tried to push himself up, got his hands flat, got some pressure going, but his arms, he said it was like pushing against something that kept moving, like the ground itself wasn't cooperating. 7 minutes? He told me it was 7 minutes. Carol said 11, but Walter corrected her when she wasn't in the room. 7, he'd counted. A woman stopped, maybe 60 years old, gray coat, carrying a bag from the drugstore. She crouched down and said, "Are you all right?" He told her he was fine. She looked at him for a moment. He said she had this expression, not unkind, just uncertain, and then she stood back up and walked on. He wasn't angry about that either. I waited to see if he was, but he said she probably figured I had it handled. He said it like he was defending her, like he wanted to make sure I didn't think badly of her. I didn't say anything to that. I don't know what I would have said. Here's the thing about Walter that you have to understand. He was always the strong one, not in a loud way, not the kind of man who makes a point of it. Just physically, there was always something solid about him. The way he stood, the way he moved through a space. Even at 75, 76, he had this quality of a person who had never once in his life needed to ask for help with anything physical, and didn't expect to start. We worked at the same plant for a long time. Different sections, he was on the floor, I was in logistics, but you get to know people, you notice things. And what I noticed about Walter early on was that whenever something heavy needed moving, whenever something was stuck or broken or needed force applied to it, Walter was already there, not showing off, just handling it like it was the most natural thing in the world. We became real friends because of a loading dock situation one winter. I won't get into the whole thing, but it was cold. It took about 6 hours, and at the end of it we were both tired, and neither of us had made it worse, which in that situation was about all you could ask for. After that, we just stayed in contact. 41 years. That's how it works sometimes. You go through something ordinary together, and then you just don't stop knowing each other. His hands are still strong. I looked at them that afternoon while he was talking. Same hands he's always had, big, a little rough. The knuckle on his right middle finger still sits wrong, something that happened at the plant years ago. I was never entirely clear on the details, and Walter never volunteered them, but the hands themselves are strong. You can see it. And somehow that made it worse. That his hands were still exactly what they'd always been, and it hadn't mattered, because what his arms couldn't do was push the full weight of him up off cold, wet pavement. Different muscles, different thing entirely. But try explaining that to a man who has built his whole sense of himself, 81 years of it, on being someone whose body solves problems. Carol came in from the kitchen at some point with coffee. She handed me a cup and gave Walter a look, not a mean look, just a checking look, the kind children give their parents when they think the parent doesn't notice, and then she went back in. Walter watched her go. Then he said, "She wants me to get one of those things for the bathroom." I said, "What things?" He said, "The bar, the handlebar, so you don't fall getting out of the tub." I didn't say anything right away. He said I told her I'd think about it, which meant he'd told her no, but he didn't want to say that to me directly. I drank my coffee. He said, "It's not that I'm against it, He stopped, looked at the television. The birds were still on. "I just haven't thought about it enough yet." I said, Okay. He said, "You have one?" I said, "Had one put in about 2 years ago." He looked at me. I said, "My daughter found somebody. Took about an hour." He nodded slowly, like he was filing that away somewhere. Not agreeing to anything, just filing it. We watched the birds for a while after that. Neither of us said much. That's one of the things about a friendship that long. You don't have to keep filling the air. You can just sit there with it. I go over there on Thursdays now. I'm not entirely sure why Thursdays. The first time I went, it was a Thursday, and then the next week he mentioned something about a show he watches on Thursday evenings, and I said I'd come by before that, and then it just became the thing. Thursdays. We don't talk about the Curb anymore. We watch whatever's on. He still keeps the volume too high, but I've stopped mentioning it. Probably it's not the volume. Probably it's his hearing. But that's not a conversation either of us has started yet. Last week he fixed the latch on his back screen door. The spring mechanism had corroded. He showed me the old part, held it up so I could see where it had gone wrong, and he'd ordered the replacement himself online. His granddaughter helped him find it, but he'd put it in himself. Took him most of a morning, he said. He was pleased about it. Not in a big way. He just mentioned it, brought me back there to show me the door, opened it and closed it a few times so I could hear how clean it latched now. I said, "Looks good." He said, "Works anyway." On the drive home I kept thinking about that. Works anyway. The way he said it. Like looking good was beside the point. Like the only thing that mattered was that it did what it was supposed to do. I think that's what he's working on right now. Not the door. Himself. Figuring out what still works, what needs adjusting, what he can fix himself, and what he's going to have to let someone help him with. That's not a fast process for a man like Walter, but he's working on it. Thursdays, I can see him working on it. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a minute. My house was quiet. It gets quiet in the evenings now. That's just how it is. I thought about what he said. My body couldn't fix it. And I thought about the woman in the gray coat who walked on. And I thought about Carol's face when she handed me the coffee. And I thought about a loading dock in winter 41 years ago. Two men, neither of us young anymore even then, just getting through something cold together, and neither of us making it worse. I went inside, turned the television on, turned it back off, went to the back of the house and checked the screen door. The latch has been sticky for a couple months. Works fine, a little stiff, but it catches. I stood there and opened it and closed it a few times. Fine. Went and got my jacket. Found the number for the hardware store. Figured I'd call in the morning.